Could you describe what it was like to be in Frost during Amherst Uprising?
I can. I remember I got there really early and I was stopping by, which I think was a lot of people. I was like, oh, there's a thing in Frost. My students told me I should come, so I'm going to stop it. And so I remember going in and it was pretty packed, which was already itself pretty amazing. Um, and yeah, I remember being a lot of people, a lot of, it's very Amherst. So it was a lot of on the faculty and staff side, which is mainly who I saw and was watching. I wasn't paying very close attention to the students. Um, which I mean, mainly it doesn't sound, might sound weird, but it's part of my policy. And I think a lot of faculty have it where it's like you watch students because you're watching them for responses for things that are productive, but you don't look at them, if that makes sense. So like I can tell you immediately like if I felt like I saw a student who looked distressed or looked this or felt that. We've asked what they were wearing. I can't tell you because I didn't see it. Right. So I had that sort of view on. And I remember thinking how on the student side, how high feelings felt. And then on the faculty side and the staff side, um, it was very, I felt like surprised to be there because faculty and staff didn't really know it was coming. No one did, but also not surprised because you're sort of always waiting for sort of the top to come off, right? And it goes off, and not to play it down, but it goes off almost like on a schedule and it's normal. So you're thinking, okay, this is our sort of normally scheduled, top coming off, but then it turned into something that was much more than that. And so I think you saw people very much get in a mode of knowing we're going to be there a long time in the library.
Were there any conversations you had during Amherst Uprising that stick out in your memory?
During them, I don't think I talked to anyone. Not a talker. Hilariously in that kind of setting. And it was deadly on the, again, I was standing with what was mainly faculty and staff, and we were silent intentionally so. Because in a way it wasn't our moment. And so I think there was a lot of watching and a lot of trying to absorb and also, also a lot of game planning, right? And so in a sense of like, you're also thinking like, in 2 hours, I'm going to walk back into my class. What do I say? So I think everyone, including me, this is before we realized we are going to be there for like 2 days. But we were very much, or I was very much in my own mind, I think. Because also there were also, all kinds of, it was a response originally to sort of national events. And so I think all of that was already weighing heavily on myself and others. So there was also a part of trying to compartmentalize like my feelings versus the student feelings, trying to figure out what outcomes might be, thinking about what has to happen on the administrative side to make sure these voices actually get heard in a forum outside of the moment. So I think, yeah, there's a lot on my mind. I wasn't talking. That's a very long way of saying through a lot of words that I said nothing. And I don't believe I had any conversations during that time. I had a lot of significant looking. I wish I could explain or like distribute the sense of looking, which is mainly how faculty and staff communicate in most moments, particularly when students are around. So there was very little talking, but a lot of significant looking. That was important. Like someone starts talking and you're thinking like, please don't mess this up, or oh God, no, not this person, or okay. So there was a lot of that, but no talking.
In the days afterwards, were there conversations then that you remember, or did you, when you returned to your classroom and into the environment outside of Frost, did you notice a change or a shift on campus in any way?
It was very somber, but looking back, it was all again, the days leading up were already so somber. And the weather was kind of ick, and it was a whole sort of moment. I remember not leaving that night, and it was, cold and dark, as is normal in November. And it was also, you know, remembering some point inside and people were outside just sort of screaming. And I remember that was really compelling to me and I thought it was really important. It was a very, for me, very Black woman moment of just rage. And I remember that feeling really good. I remember sitting there and thinking, like, yes, scream. It's a very kind of generalized scream. You're not screaming at anyone, but it's also not crying, right? And so it was a really interesting. So I thought, in a way, that was very much the campus feeling. And I think, again, my response is split across the different people and constituencies I was sort of dealing with in that moment. But it was mainly just how to sort of hold it together. I was mostly in the library. I didn't leave the library on Friday. And then, or Thursday, it must have been a Thursday. This occurred to me. And then I remember in those moments, for instance, being out with a lot of untenured faculty. And I think for them, it was just trying to be clear about where they fit in and how they could contribute. And I had a lot of those conversations following the time in the library. And then with sort of tenured faculty who've been there longer, there was just the immediate sort of strategizing again. Right. So in that moment of protest, there has to be someone responsible for producing a container, right, into which to sort of pour those feelings. And because I don't want to say contain. When I say container, again, it's just making sure the immediate work of sort of translation begins to happen. And so I think there was a lot of game planning around that, right? How to talk about the things that students were saying and how to get into a language that could be heard across constituencies. And for me, that was most of the conversation. Outside the library, it was straight to strategy. And then there were a few faculty who, you know, were like, what's even happening? But I have to say, I was in the eye roll, like, sort of crew around them. I'm like, I can't help you right now, dude. I remember saying that to someone, be like, I just can't do this with you right now, but we can talk later. So I also, in some way, I guess, put a container on myself because I have a sort of like mini faculty, a faculty role, but also a larger community role. And so for me, it was about also a kind of triage around, do students feel safe? Do people feel okay? Do the people who I know, particularly like, you know, that tiny, tiny, tiny handful of faculty who identified at the time as faculty of color, this is before the big hiring blitz of the last few years, making sure people felt safe, already game planning how to respond to our colleagues without having to give too much of ourselves because we're like, we've been telling you these things for like literally 20 years. And so figuring out sort of where that balance is. And for me, that was a lot of the conversation. I remember thinking a lot about trying to sort of figure out where, again, how to contribute and be present, but also not to be sort of sucked dry by it. Um, I mean, it was really, yeah. And when I say sucked dry, I don't mean like in a, but just sort of in a way of thinking about, again, how to be present for students, there to answer other faculty questions, but on the faculty side, also being clear that I want to help people because I want to help the community. I care a lot about the community, but I'm also not people's personal resource, which can happen really easily. And I think that's, you know, and that was complex. I mean, at the time, one of a small handful, maybe two, women who identified as Black and were tenured. And so the burden of that. And in terms of tenured Black male faculty at that point, 2015, in terms of people who will be present on campus and weren't the sort of administrative sleight of hand and being counted as faculty, it's one person, two people. So the extent to which we had to be very careful about being able to be like sort of on the one hand constantly available, but also to not sort of have the responsibility for quote dealing with the uprising being shifted only onto our shoulders was a pretty massive one. So I concentrated on coaching and working with untenured faculty what to do in the classroom, what to say, how to think about relations with older senior faculty, or just other faculty who are probably saying what could be easily construed and rightfully construed as inappropriate responses, how to manage that without losing your top, because you actually don't get to flip out. It's really hard not to. And that alone was its own sort of constant, like, master class and like not losing your shit. Um, Especially at a moment like that where everything felt very precarious because we didn't know what the outcome was going to be or the response was going to be. And I think, um, and when I say response, I just mean laterally. So, what are your colleagues going to say? What are students going to say? What are parents going to say? In retrospect, we have thoughts about that, but in the moment, it was very unclear. It was very unprecedented, and we were dealing with what was at times clearly and obviously a very new president. Um, so when I think back to it as 2015, and you're thinking about having a relatively new president who was still finding her way, in terms of figuring out her own relationship to the student body and responsibilities to the student body, and also perhaps had less time to become attuned to what it meant to respond, to a student body, to hear the student body. It was hard to know in that moment what that outcome would be. Like, what was this going to look like? Um, so I think there was a lot of trepidation, a lot of, on the one hand, intense openness that was really precipitated by the students, but at the same time, also a lot of trying to figure out how to make sure the moment would stay a productive moment, across the college.
Now looking back, how do you understand the impact of Amherst Uprising on the college?
When I think back, it's a hard question. I would say that no, it had a great impact. What I think about, what I see, what I know is that Amherst Uprising fundamentally transformed the faculty. And it transformed for many the faculty's relationship to being able to understand how students from all kinds of backgrounds could be in such a position of sort of environmental privilege, but how there were still the sort of, constant moments and presence, constant events that would pull them out of that feeling of inclusion and privilege. Um, and I think it was really important for faculty to be able to understand that students have such a clear stake in transforming the institution into a place where they feel comfortable, not because they have individual needs, but because the students were so committed and had such a clear understanding of what it takes to make the sort of, you know, experiment in sort of multicultural democracy that any college and university should be, to make that actually work and to make that actually be real. So I think it greatly increased the faculty's sense of students as stakeholders. And it was deeply transformative because I think faculty, um, easily, maybe rightfully, can sort of fall into a place of, I'm here to do my job, to do my job well. I'm here to teach. I'm here to have content knowledge. I'm here to guide people through that content knowledge, and etc. But I think with Amherst Uprising, it helped them better understand students as partners in a sort of localized environmental social mission. And I think that was amazing. And I do think there are moments, I'm thinking back to the library where students are saying, it's a small place. So, students are saying things, and there's a faculty person sitting there going, that student's talking about me. And there's a person standing next to them going, yeah, she's talking about you. And I think it's difficult for anyone, including me, including you, anyone sometimes, in a social space, so a deeply networked, interconnected space, to understand the consequences of our own small moments of action. And what Amherst Uprising did for faculty is it pulled us more to a more self-conscious place in that network, so that faculty had to more understand themselves as agents and actors in students' lives, but at the same time also understand that this is not a top-down sort of movement, that students are equal stakeholders, right, in thinking about what the world should look like, what the campus should look like, what is fair, what is unfair. um, I led the process with students on one of the following nights around producing the sort of, report around the sort of circumstances that for them had led to the outpouring at, because it didn't lead to Amherst Uprising. It led to what was said during Amherst Uprising, which is important in the sense that no one went to the library thinking like today is the day we're going to like expose all the truths about our lives at the school. That's what it came and became. It didn't start that way, right? It was something else. But I remember leading the students through the process and being really struck by how they knew, and this is a wide variety, a very diverse set of students, but once you got them talking, they could all identify the problems. And so it really came down to the differences between which students felt that they could ignore campus issues and which felt they couldn't. And what Amherst Uprising did was make everyone understand that they all had to care. Everyone, when things are wrong, usually know that something's amiss, that something's wrong, that someone's not happy. But the difference comes down to who actually has to act on it, who actually feels motivated to respond, and who actually takes responsibility. And so my very long answer ends by saying I think what Amherst Uprising changed is that it forced more faculty and also staff and, of course, students to understand the extent to which they had to be responsible to each other if this community were to survive. Um, the question of what it means on the administrative side, because administration at Amherst, remember, is very small. You're talking about a very small handful of people. So I want to separate that out for a moment. But I do think on the faculty side, it led to a lot of introspection and a lot of commitment to change that was actually amazing and unprecedented. And that much of what we think about over the years is transformation at the college, which I've been a big part of in terms of hiring, changing our hiring practices, changing how we think about policy, changing how we think about, again, how we articulate to people coming into the community the responsibilities to the group on the faculty and staff side was only made possible because of this moment where people suddenly understood the extent to which they had a stake and were also able to see other people as holding an equal stake. I think that at that moment, the forces around the college had amassed in such a way that change was inevitable, and it was beautiful to see. I mean, it was a story about how protest works. Because we all taught to talk and hate it and this, and you're being so unruly, or this is so loud, or oh God, we're off schedule with our classes. Nope, it works. Full stop. So, one thing I can say that came out of Amherst Uprising that was really great is that it really, I think, remember Amherst, and this is why I talk about administration is so complex, is a faculty run institution. So when you're talking about administration, you're talking about a very small number of people, but most of the day-to-day work is handled to varying degrees of success by faculty, um, which is complex to say the least. Um, but what I can say came out of Amherst Uprising, this is true of my position and of Professor Hart's position, as faculty diversity and inclusion officers, which was a position that came very much out of the uprising, um, was that our job, which was deeply tied to tying to, which is deeply tied to the recruitment and diversification of the faculty, which we accomplished, by the way, really required us to work very carefully and thoughtfully with departments. And I am not convinced, I don't think it's wrong to say, I'm not convinced many departments would have been as eager to do that work. if they hadn't sort of lived through Amherst Uprising. So Amherst Uprising absolutely had direct impact on the recruitment and hiring of non-white faculty because it enabled the conditions at the departmental level to get people more willing to understand why doing so was critical.
How do you want Amherst Uprising to be remembered?
I think the college, like any college or university, has many of these moments, and it should. That's part of the health of the community. So it's exemplary and special for us because generationally, that's our moment. But the one thing you also understand as an Amherst, at that point in 2015, been there for 15 years, um, there's a way in which what you want to come out of each of these moments is a healthier institution and an institution that would that is more able to be ready for the next such moment because you don't know what the moment is going to be because the world changes, right? But that at each moment, a level of policy, for instance, um, and this is something I think Amherst is still working on and doing some soul searching around. Because on a level of policy, you want to make it more possible for each of these moments to be more productive towards the health of the college and of the social community of the college, which is to say that every moment of uprising should make the world better, and each moment should also be a little easier. Um, Amherst Uprising came to a head because there were external/internal pressures. So things happening in the world, whether affecting people in the community, everyone in the community, to varying degrees. And then there's also the internal pressure of prior to Amherst Uprising, there being just such large populations of students who felt that their needs were being ignored. But not that they were unspoken, this is key and what I'm getting at. When you asked me a question earlier about being in the library, no one is saying anything, frankly, that many faculty, particularly me, had not heard before. What was different, however, was a sense that more kinds of people had to listen and care. So I want to be careful of saying these things had gone unspoken. They had been constantly spoken, right? But they had gone unacknowledged. And so you're hoping then with every moment of uprising that, the acknowledgement quotient raises so that you're getting a little bit farther each time and you're not repeating the past. So I hope there's never another Amherst Uprising in the sense of a moment where students feel that all of these things about social identity had gone unspoken, had become oppressive to so many people over literally decades at the college, right? What you hope, and what you hope is the legacy, at least for me, of Amherst Uprising, is that it create a world in which people understand the structures through which they can actually initiate change on the campus, and that students can come into the college with a stronger sense of stakeholding, but also the sense that the thing that they are caring for isn't only themselves in the present, but also thinking about the college over time. And that's part of the difference sometimes between how students and even faculty think about the college, right? So faculty are at the college for the most part for decades, where students come and go. And so students still, of course, have a strong attachment to the college, but it's actually quite different because they rotate. That's the joke. Like faculty, and you'll see it as an alum, we get older, but everyone you work with stays 18 to 22. It's actually crazy, right? It can become a strange sort of feeling sometimes. And so when you're thinking about the legacy or how something is remembered, we're already deep into the generations of students who will have no memory and no reason to remember. And so the burden of remembering Amherst Uprising ultimately falls on the institution, and ultimately it falls around the question of policy. And I think the policy question, what kinds of structures got made out of Amherst Uprising, becomes the most important thing. So when I say I don't have much of a stake in how it's remembered, it's only because I care about the memory as a thing that with a particular group of students and faculty I was present for, of course. From a memorial perspective, I care deeply. But ultimately, what I care about is that the transformations in the college become so complete that no one has to think very much about anymore. I don't want a world where, students are thinking about how they only have like one African American woman professor, right? I don't want a world where they're thinking if I don't take this one particular class in psychology, I'll never have a black male professor. Um, that's ridiculous. And so when I think about Amherst Uprising being remembered, again, what I care about is that the college has changed in such ways that it becomes a moment that marks a change, but those changes were lasting and deeply transformative, and that we're not going back.
Are there any other thoughts you would like to offer on Amherst Uprising?
Hmm. I know. All I can say is I'm so grateful. I just can't overstate how hard and how long so many of us had been working for a different Amherst, right? When I was hired in Amherst in like 99, 2000, I was hired with a promise that it was going to be different. And then we got to the place where I could say a decade passed and it wasn't that different, right? Um, which is common across workplaces. This is not an Amherst thing per se, but Amherst can move a little more slowly sometimes. And so when I think back, oh my God, I'm getting teary. When I think back on it, I only have gratitude. There's really nothing else. I don't think anyone could have predicted the moment. I don't think anyone could have predicted when and how. But the level of just, again, the deep tissue transformation on the part of the faculty was unprecedented. And so when I think back, or even like when I think back to, being in the library and it's dark outside in November and I'm hearing like these women, these Black women, um, just screaming. And again, not angry screaming, not crying screaming, but just so much feeling that just surpasses words. In thinking about how that made possible, just sort of, so much of work is about getting things done, which also sometimes presupposes a level of not always feeling yourself in the moment, allowing Amherst to sort of feel the various kinds of pains that members of the community had been experiencing again for decades. And to take that feeling and immediately on the side of the students begin to transform that into a call for change and empathy and compassion and transformation. It was the best thing that ever happened to Amherst College, and I'll stand by it.